Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Pull up a chair for this one, because it's not like most of the stories we tell here. His name is Peter. 61 years old, from the East Rand of Johannesburg, Boksburg specifically, and he spent nearly 4 decades of his life up power poles and steel pylons on the South African Highveld. A lineman. The man who climbs up into the storm while everyone else is running for cover. He'll tell you himself, it's not a job for men who hesitate. When Peter came to the Philippines, he had about $160,000 in the bank. The whole of his life, really, converted into a number on a screen. He wasn't looking for a bar. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was looking for something a lot simpler than that, something a lot of you watching will understand better than you'd like to. What he found instead was a woman behind a bake shop counter, a little boy, a piece of land in the province, and a house going up brick by brick that he was paying for and would never own. I'm not going to tell you how this one ends. I'll only say this. At a certain point, Peter found a single piece of paper. Small thing. Folded up. And what he did after he found it, the cold, quiet, methodical way he did it, is the reason we're able to sit here and hear his story at all. Instead of reading about another old man cleaned out to nothing, this one's going to stick with you. Here's Peter, in his own words. Yeah. Where do I start with this? 38 years I worked the lines. You know what that is, a lineman? The power lines. The big steel towers marching across the veld, the poles down your street. That's us. We go up. When the storm hits and the whole grid trips and everybody in the country is sitting in the dark cursing Eskom, somebody has to climb up in the wind and the rain and put it right. That was me. Nearly 4 decades of it, around Johannesburg, out on the Highveld, up where the air is thin and cold and the ground is very far away. You learn a thing up there. You learn it in your body, not your head. You learn that a man who hesitates dies. Simple as that. You don't half commit to a move at 40 meters. You look at it properly. You take your time. And then you commit all the way, no pulling back. Slow to decide. Total once you do. That was me on the poles and, that was me in my life, and that's half of how I ended up where I ended up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I trusted things that hold under load. That's how my whole brain is wired, if you want the truth. Tension, torque, the pull on a cable, whether a thing will take the weight when you put it on. Numbers you can check. A load you can calculate. Give me that, and I am a happy man. Give me feelings. Give me people. And I am a bloody child. Always was. I had a wife, Marina. We were married a long time, and I thought that was one of the loads that holds. You understand? I thought I had checked it. 30 years of checking it. And then I'm 47, and she sits me down at the kitchen table and tells me she's done. And that was that. She was gone. And here's the thing I've never told anybody, so I might as well tell all of you. Everyone moved on. Her, the friends, my brother, everybody. Life carried them forward like a river carries a stick. Me, I just stopped. Right there, at that kitchen table. I froze at that exact moment, and I stayed frozen for the better part of 13 years. I still had her number in my phone. I'm not proud of that. I'd catch myself saying, our house, our Bri, years after there was no our anything. A grown man. It's stupid. I know it's stupid. I did it anyway. I sold the house eventually. The one in Boksburg. The one that was ours. I sold it because the rooms had gone quiet, in a way I can't properly explain to you. Not quiet, like peaceful. Quiet, like a machine that stopped running and shouldn't have. You'd walk in from work, and the silence would just hum. sit on your chest. I couldn't take it anymore. So I sold it and put the money in the bank. Call it 2.9 million rand, which is about 160,000 American. More money than I'd ever had in one place in my whole life. And I moved into a little one-bedroom flat. And I sat there. That's the part nobody warns you about. Retirement? They make it sound like a holiday. Nobody tells you what it does to a man who was somebody. Up on the pole, I was the one they called. Big storm, lines down. They phoned Peter. Now the phone doesn't ring. You go from being needed by the whole grid to being needed by nobody, overnight, and your hands don't know what to do with themselves. I'd make rooibos I didn't want just to have something to hold. 60 years old. Divorced. Still not over it. More than a decade on. Living alone in a flat with beige walls I never chose. Money in the bank, and no earthly idea what a man is supposed to do with it, or with himself, or with the 20-odd years that might still be coming. And underneath all of it, this thing I couldn't say out loud to a single living soul. I was scared the silence was it now. That this was the shape of the rest of it. That I'd had my one life, checked my one load, got it wrong, and now I'd just sit here and hum like those empty rooms until it was over. That's the man I was. That's important, so you understand what came after. I wasn't a fool chasing a young girl. I mean, yeah, all right, maybe I was, in the end. But that's not where it started. Where it started was an old man in a beige flat who was terrified he was already dead and just hadn't been told yet. And then, one afternoon, my mate Henny came round with his phone and a stupid grin, and he showed me some photos. And he said a thing to me. Just one sentence, really. Didn't mean anything by it. I'll get to that. Henny was a lineman, too. Retired a few years before me, worked the Free State lines mostly. We'd have a beer sometimes at a place in Boksburg. Two old Okies talking about the old days because neither of us had much new to talk about. And one afternoon he comes round to my flat, uninvited, the way Henny did everything. And he's got this grin on him like a schoolboy. He'd been to the Philippines, 3 weeks, Cebu, and he pulls out his phone and starts showing me photos. Beaches, Jah, blue water, the whole postcard business. But that's not what he kept pointing at. He kept scrolling to the photos with people in them. Him at some little eatery with a plate of what he called lechon, this whole roast pig business. Him at a market. Him with a couple of locals he'd met, everyone laughing at the camera. And he says to me, and I swear this is the whole reason I ended up where I ended up, he says, "Peter, man, the people there, they actually smile at you, like they're glad you're there." That's it. That's the whole sales pitch. No mention of women, nothing like that. Henny wasn't that kind. He just meant the place had warmth in it. And he'd noticed, because we were two men who'd run pretty short of warmth. And something in me just latched onto it. They're glad you're there. When was the last time anybody was glad I was there? I couldn't tell you. Genuinely couldn't have given you a date. Now, understand something about me. I am not an impulsive man. I told you already. 38 years of measuring loads before you commit. I have never in my life bought a baccy without 3 weeks of research. I read the reviews. I checked the numbers. I look at a thing from every angle, and then I look again. I booked that flight to Cebu 4 days later. Didn't research anything. Didn't join a single one of those Facebook expat groups. Didn't watch any of the warning videos. Didn't watch channels like this one. And, maybe if I had. But I didn't. First properly unmeasured decision of my whole life. 60 years old. And I made it in an afternoon with Henny's photos still up on his phone. I wasn't going for a wife. I want to be very clear about that because I know how this sounds. Old man, money in the bank, flying to the Philippines. You already think you know the story. I thought I knew it too. I told myself I was just going to see if a place could still feel like something. That's all. Just to check whether I was actually dead inside or only mostly. The flight was long. Joburg to Singapore, then across. And then that door opens at Mactan Cebu Airport, and the heat hits you like walking into a wall. Not South African heat, which is dry, cracks your lips. This was wet, thick, like breathing through a warm towel. My shirt was soaked before I got to the taxi rank, and it stayed that way, more or less, for the next several months. And the noise. Yeah, the noise. Tricycles buzzing everywhere like angry insects. These little motorbikes with sidecars bolted on. Jeepneys painted up in colors you wouldn't believe, packed with people. Diesel smoke pouring out the back. Somebody's karaoke going somewhere, always. Some fellow murdering a Whitney Houston song at full volume at 2 in the afternoon. Roosters. In the middle of a city. Roosters. Going off at all hours like they can't tell time. I stayed in a pension house in Lapu-Lapu. That's on Mactan Island, across the bridge from Cebu City proper, where the airport is. Modest place. Clean enough. Run by an older lady who called everybody sir and ma'am. Cost me almost nothing. I think it worked out to about $1,200 a night. Call it 22 US dollars. And I remember thinking that alone was a kind of madness after South African prices. That was my first lesson in the money thing, actually, before there was any woman involved at all. Everywhere I went, I was sir. Sir, taxi? Sir, come look. Hey, Kano! That was a new one. Took me a while to work out it meant American, from Americano, and that as far as anybody could see, there was no difference between a South African and an American and a German. You were a Kano, a white foreigner, and a Kano everybody just quietly assumed was rich. Which, all right. Compared to a fellow driving a tricycle for $300 a day, I suppose I was. I had $160,000 sitting in a bank in Joburg. I'd never thought of myself as a rich man one single day in my life. Working man, always. Calluses and a bad back and a pension. But over there, the maths is just different, and you feel the assumption land on you the moment you walk out the door. Everybody's a little bit sunnier with you, and you can't ever quite tell. Is that the warmth Henny was on about? Or is that the wallet they can see in your back pocket? I couldn't tell then. Tell you the truth, I still can't, about a lot of it. The first week I mostly kept to myself. Watched. That's my nature. I'd walk, I'd sit, I'd have a San Miguel at some little place in the evening, and just watch the whole circus go by. I wasn't chatting anybody up. Wouldn't have known how. Marina was the only woman I'd properly spoken to in 30 years, and I was 13 years out of practice on top of that. But I found this bake shop, little place, 2 streets from the pension. Nothing special from the outside. Glass cases with Pandazol and these bright-colored cakes. A coffee machine, a couple of plastic tables. But it was air-conditioned, which after a morning in that heat felt like the mercy of God himself. And it was quiet, and nobody hassled you there. So I started going every morning. Coffee and one of those little bread rolls. Sit in the cool. Watch the street through the glass. And there was a woman behind the counter. I wasn't... Look, I want to be careful how I say this, because I've had a lot of time to think about it since. I did not walk in there hunting. I walked in there for the aircon and the coffee. But she was there most mornings, and she had this way about her. And after a few days, she started to recognize me. She noticed I counted my change every time. Old habit. A working man's habit. You count what they give you back. And one morning she laughed about it. Not nasty, just this warm little laugh. And she said, "Sir Peter, you are so careful." Sir Peter. She, the 500th, heard the pension lady call me Peter and turned it into Peter, and it stuck. And I never corrected her. Not once in everything that came after. I'll get to her properly. But that's where it started. A bake shop, aircon, and a woman who thought it was sweet that I counted my change. So I kept going to the bake shop. Every morning. And I'll be honest with you, it stopped being about the aircon pretty quick. Her name was Jocelyn. Everybody called her Joes. 34 years old, which, I know, I did the sum, too. 27 years between us. I'm not blind. She worked behind the counter, and I found out later she didn't own the place. She just ran the till and the baking for the actual owner, some lady who was hardly ever there. Long hours for not much money. That's most people over there, when you scratch the surface, working themselves half to death for peanuts and still finding a way to smile at the fellow buying his Pandesal. What got me about Jose wasn't that she was beautiful. I mean, she was easy to look at, but that's not it. It was that she didn't perform for me. You go around a place like that as an obvious Kano, and half the young women will switch on this whole show the second they clock you. Big eyes, hi, handsome, the works. You can feel it. It's like a light coming on. Joss never did that. She was just normal with me. Bit shy even. Teased me about counting my change and then went back to her work. And that's the thing I keep coming back to when I try to explain to people how a careful man walks off a cliff. It wasn't the flirting that got me. It was the not flirting. Because I'd braced for the flirting. I knew about that. The not flirting walked right past all my defenses because I didn't know I needed any. We got to talking, slowly, over maybe 2 weeks. Little bits. She'd ask where I was from, laugh when I said South Africa, because she thought that meant I lived with lions. I'd ask about her day. Small, ordinary stuff. And bit by bit, things came out. She had a boy, 7 years old, named Junjun. Well, Jun was the real name. Junjun's what they called him. The father was long gone, out of the picture since the boy was a baby. And I noticed she never said one bitter word about him. Just, he is not here, and moved on. I respected that. God knows I'm a man who spent 13 years being bitter about a marriage. And here's this woman half my age, who just didn't bother with it. And her mother. Mama was in Bohol. That's the next island over. Ferry ride from Cebu, real province, provincial. Farming country, Bahay Kubo huts, carabao in the fields, that kind of place. Mama wasn't well. Jose would mention it, and then wave it off. She is okay. Don't worry. That was the phrase. Don't worry. She was always the one telling me not to worry. You have to understand what that does to a man like me. Everyone I'd ever known wanted something out loud. Marina wanted things. My bosses wanted things. The whole world's got its hand out one way or another. And here's this woman who mentions a sick mother, a fatherless boy, a hard life, and then tells me not to worry about it. Doesn't ask for a thing. I was the one who started offering. That's what I need you to hear, because it matters for everything that came after. I was not manipulated into the first rand of it. I volunteered. It started tiny. One morning I heard her on the phone in Bisaya. That's the local language down there, not Tagalog, They're proud of the difference, sounding stressed, and after she told me it was nothing, the Sari store where she bought Jun's stuff had cut off her credit or something. Small. Embarrassing for her. So I said, "Let me help with the groceries this week." And she said, "No. No, Sir Peter, the first cannot." 3 times she said no. I had to more or less push the money on her. P2000, about $36. Nothing to me. Made her cry a little. That was the pattern from the very start, see? She refused first. Every single time. In the beginning, she refused. And every refusal made me more sure this was real, because a scammer grabs, doesn't she? A scammer's got the hand out. And Jose had the hand up, saying no. I couldn't see then that no pushed 3 times until the Kano insists is its own kind of discarte, its own kind of hustle. Might not even have been a conscious one. I genuinely don't know, to this day, how much of that girl was working me, and how much was just a proud person who hated taking charity. Both, probably. That's the answer to most of it. Both. Then it was Jun's school. New term coming, and he needed the fees, and a uniform and shoes, and she was clearly not sleeping over it. $8,000, all in, call it $140 for the whole term. I remember thinking, $140, and this child gets a year of school, and I've got $160,000 sitting in Joburg doing nothing but making me feel guilty for having it. What kind of man says no to that? So I paid it. And when I paid it, something lit up in me that had been dark a long, long time. It wasn't about her, even. It was that I mattered again. A problem existed, and I was the man who solved it. You take a fellow who spent 38 years being the one they called when the lines went down, and you retire him into a beige flat where nobody calls. And then you show him a problem he can fix with the tap of a phone. Aish. That's not temptation. That's oxygen. I want to be careful here about the God part, because it's easy to be cynical, and I don't think it's fair. Joss was properly Catholic. Went to Mass at the big church, Sundays, sometimes in the week. Little rosary on the mirror. And she'd say things like, "God is good," and "It's a blessing you came here, Sir Peter." Now, you can hear that 2 ways. You can hear a con artist buttering up the mark, or you can hear a poor woman who genuinely, truly believes a foreigner walking into her bake shop was the Lord answering a prayer she'd been saying for years. And the honest truth? I think it was both, at the same time, and I don't think she could have separated them either. By the end of that first trip, I stayed about 5 weeks, kept extending the tourist visa, 30 days at a time. I wasn't Sir Peter the customer anymore. I was something to that little family. Jun had started calling me Uncle Peter, and the first flew back to Joburg, to the beige flat and the humming silence, and I lasted about 3 weeks before I booked the next flight. I told myself I was just going back for the warmth. Same lie as the first time. But I'd already started paying. And once you've started paying, man, you've already agreed to the whole thing. You just haven't seen the invoice yet. The second trip is when it stopped being a holiday and started being a life. Or the shape of one, anyway. I rented a little place this time instead of the pension. Small apartment in Lapu-Lapu, 12,000 holes a month, about $215, with a proper aircon unit and a 2-ring stove and a view of a basketball court where the neighborhood boys played till all hours under one flickering light. That's the Philippines for you, by the way. There's a basketball court everywhere, even in places that don't have a proper road. Roosters at 4 in the morning, church bells not long after, and by afternoon, somebody's got the videoke machine out murdering My Way. You stop hearing it after a while. It becomes the sound of the place. Jos and I were a proper thing by now. She'd come by after her shift smelling of flour and sweat, and we'd walk to a little carinderia her auntie ran and eat pancit and adobo off plastic plates for almost nothing. Junjun took to me. That got me more than anything Jos did, if I'm honest. The boy would show me his homework, want me to watch him play ball, call me Uncle Peter and mean it. I never had children with Marina. That was one of the quiet griefs of my life, one I'd stopped picking at. And here's this little fella looking at me like I hung the moon. Then Mama got sick. Properly sick this time, or so I was told. I got the call. Well, Jos got the call, and I was there when she got it. And she went to pieces in a way I'd never seen from her. That's important. She wasn't asking me for anything. She was just falling apart on the plastic chair in that little apartment, phone in her hand, crying in Bisaya to somebody back in Bohol. Heart problem, they said. Mama needed a procedure at a hospital in Tagbilaran, the main town over there, and it was going to cost $95,000, about $1,650 US. Now here's a family that supports each other. You have to understand that this is not a small thing over there. It's the whole architecture of life. The eldest daughter carries the parents. Full stop. That's not manipulation. That's just how it's built. And Jos was the eldest of 4. Her being unable to help her own dying mother. That was a shame that went right to the bone of her. A loss of face in front of God and the whole family. So I paid it. Course I paid it. What was I going to do? Sit there with 160 grand in the bank and watch a woman I loved lose her mother over the price of a decent second-hand baccy? I transferred it. Gcash, then the rest by bank. And Jos, she got down on the floor of that apartment, and she thanked me like I was a saint come down off the wall of her church. God sent you, Sir Peter. God sent you to us. And I want to be dead honest about how that felt. Because this is the whole engine of the thing. It didn't feel like being fleeced. It felt like being useful. It felt like being needed for the first time in 13 years. You take a man whose entire identity was being the one they called when the lines came down, and you retire him into silence, and then you hand him a phone and a problem he can solve with his thumb. That's not a temptation he can resist. That's a resurrection. Did Mama actually have a heart procedure? I believe she was sick. I met the woman later. She was frail. It wasn't invented whole cloth. Did it cost $95,000? I never saw a hospital bill. Never asked for one. You don't ask a grieving woman for receipts, do you? That's the trap, see? Every single thing that made it hard to check was also a thing that made it feel real. After Mama, the requests didn't stop, but they changed shape. They became normal, regular. I started sending Jos a monthly amount, $20,000, about $360, for what we both just called the family. Rent for her and Jun, food, Mama's medicines, a bit for the younger siblings' school. In South African terms, that's not even 4,000 rand. Nothing. And it did more good in that family than 4,000 rand has ever done anywhere in my life. I felt like a rich man for the first time ever, and it turns out feeling like a rich man is a very expensive feeling. And the family, the family. Once you're the Kano who pays, you don't just get a girlfriend, you get everybody. There was Jos and June and Mama and the 3 younger siblings and cousins I couldn't keep straight, and an uncle who was always fixing something that needed a part. They 500 get on the video call, all of them crowding round one phone, waving, Hi, Uncle Peter. Hello, po. Thank you, po. Calling me Tito. Part of the family now. And when I flew back from a trip to Joburg once, and forgot to bring anything, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, and I learned about pasalubong the hard way. You do not come back empty-handed, ever. It's an insult. After that, I brought a whole balikbayan box every time. Chocolates, soap, clothes for the kids, a bottle of brandy for the uncle. It's expected, and I liked doing it. That's the thing. I liked being the man who arrives with the box. Was any of it a red flag? I've turned this over 1,000 times. There was a moment, once, the uncle needed P15,000 for something. A tricycle repair that was somehow going to save the family's income, and I remember a small, cold voice in the back of my head going, "Hang on, this is starting to add up." And then Yost said, "Don't give it, Tito. I'm ashamed they even asked. I'll talk to them." And she seemed genuinely angry about it. And that killed the cold voice stone dead. Because a scammer wouldn't turn the money away, would she? A scammer wouldn't be embarrassed. I think about that moment a lot now. The way she headed it off before I could get uneasy. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she was ashamed. Or maybe she understood, better than I did, that a Kano who feels squeezed pulls back, and a Kano who feels trusted opens the wallet wider on his own. I genuinely can't tell you which. Both. Always both. By the end of that second trip, I'd handed over the P95,000, plus months of the P20,000, plus the boxes, plus this and that. Call it $15,000, $16,000. All in, over the better part of a year of coming and going. And it didn't feel like $15,000. It felt like buying my way back into the land of the living, one Gcash transfer at a time. And then, one evening over San Miguel and grilled Esau on a stick, Jos started talking about the land, Mama's land, in Bohol, and a house. The land was real. I want to say that up front, because it's the one part of this whole business that was solid. And it's the part that fooled me worst. It was Mama's, in a barangay outside Lune, over on the west side of Bohol. About 20 minutes inland from the coast, on a road that turned to red mud when it rained. Coconut, and a bit of rice, a couple of scrawny goats, and this old Bahay Kubo, a bamboo and nipa hut, the proper old kind, that leaked when the rains came and shook when the wind blew. Jos grew up in that hut, 6 of them in 2 rooms. She showed me where she slept as a girl, on a mat on the split bamboo floor, and she wasn't performing when she showed me. She went quiet. That kind of quiet you can't fake. And the idea, when it came so gently, I didn't even feel it arrive. We were sitting outside one evening, San Miguel going warm in the heat. I saw grilling somewhere down the lane, and she said, not asking, just wondering out loud, how nice it would be, one day, to build Mama a proper concrete house on that land. Somewhere that didn't leak. Somewhere Jun could have his own room. And for me and her to have a place there too. For when I came. Our place. A home. Our place. She said, our. You have to understand what that word does to a man who sold the last hour he had and moved into a beige flat. I'd spent 13 years with no our anything. And here it was, again, offered up over a warm beer under a sky with more stars in it than I'd seen since I was a boy on the poles at night. So I said yes. Not that night. I'm not a complete fool. I took a couple of weeks. But I said yes. And once I said yes, the careful man came back online. And I asked the sensible question, whose name does it go in? Because I knew. I did know. A foreigner cannot own land in the Philippines, not a square meter of it. That's the law, plain and simple. You can own a condominium unit in a building, up to the foreign limit. But land? Never. Everybody who's spent 10 minutes reading about the place knows it. And I'd spent more than 10 minutes by then. I'd started, finally, reading the forums. And they all said the same thing in big red letters. Do not build a house on land you cannot own. Do not put it in her name. I knew all of that. And I did it anyway. That's the part one can't dress up for you. I told myself the things you tell yourself. It's Mama's land. It stays in the family, regardless. Everybody does it this way. And they do, that's true. Half the foreigners over there have built on the wife's land, or the girlfriend's land. It's the standard workaround. I told myself Joss would never. Not Joss. After everything. And anyway, we'd marry eventually, and then I'd have the marriage visa, the 13A, and be properly settled. And it'd all be moot. I built a whole scaffolding of reasons, and every plank of it was really just the same plank. I wanted it to be true, so I decided it was. The money went in stages, and this is where the real money starts. So pay attention if you're the type who might do this yourself one day. First stage, $600,000 to clear the old hut, level the ground, sort the paperwork, buy the materials for the foundation, and get it poured. Round about $10,500 US. Sent it in 3 transfers as the engineer. Joss's cousin, who was a real builder, I'll give him that, sent through the costings. I even got photos. Concrete going down, rebar sticking up, Joss standing in the middle of it, grinning with her hand on her heart. God is good, Tito. God is so good. Second stage was the big one. The structure itself. Walls, roof, the works. Proper hollow block construction, tiled floors, a real kitchen, 3 bedrooms because the family had grown in the telling. P1.1 million, about $19,000. I sent it over 4 or 5 months as the thing went up, chasing the photos, feeling, and I'm not ashamed of this part, feeling proud. Me, the lineman, building something that would hold in a place where I was wanted, for people who called me Tito and meant it. Add it to what came before, and I'm now the better part of $30,000 into this family, on top of the 15 or so from before. Call it 45,000 US, all in, over about 18 months, out of my 160. Nearly a third of everything I had in the world, poured into red Bohol mud, with my name on precisely none of it. And here's the thing about that period. The thing I need you to hear, because it's how the trap actually works. I was happy. Genuinely, properly happy. For the first time since Marina. I wasn't being tortured. Nobody had a gun to my head. Every peso felt like love going out, and love coming back. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't feel like bleeding. It feels like building. The cracks were there. I can see them now, laid out neat as a fault report. The trips, mainly. Joe started going to Cebu City for 2-3 days at a time. For my cousin's papers. Always the papers. Some visa thing, some document, some appointment. And on those trips, she'd go a bit quiet on the phone. Slower to answer. And I noticed, the lineman in me noticed, the part that reads a meter, that she was warmest right after a big transfer cleared and coolest in the days before I sent one. I clocked that pattern. I want to be honest that I clocked it, because it'd be easy to play the total fool, and I wasn't quite. I saw the correlation. Warmth up when money went out. Warmth down when it didn't. Same swing, over and over. And then I unsaw it. That's the only word for what I did. I looked straight at the reading on the meter, and I decided the meter was faulty. Told myself she was stressed about the build. Tired from the travel. The distance was hard on her. Every explanation in the world except the simple one that was staring me in the face. The house was nearly done. Roof on, windows in, one of those little tiled patios out front where Mama could sit. Joe sent a photo of it at dusk, lights on inside, and captioned it, "Our home, my love, soon." And I sat in my apartment in Lapu-Lapu, looking at that photo like a man looks at the promised land. 3 days later, she went to Cebu City again. Cousin's papers. And this time, she left a jacket at my place. My jacket. One I'd lent her against the aircon on the bus. I didn't go through it to catch her. I want that on record. I went through it because it needed washing. It was folded up small in the inside pocket. The kind of fold you do without thinking. A bit of paper you meant to bin and forgot. And I nearly binned it myself without looking. I want you to sit with that for a second, because that's how thin the whole thing is. A man's whole life turning on, whether he glances down before he throws away a scrap of paper. But I'm a lineman. 38 years of checking things before you throw them away, because the one you don't check is the one that's still live. So I unfolded it. A receipt. From a place in Mandaue, that's part of Metro Cebu, over the bridge from the city proper. And it took me a moment, because I didn't know the place. And then I did know the place, because the name of it, and the little line underneath told you exactly what it was. One of those drive-in motels, short-time rooms, a room, one night, paid, and a date printed across the top. I stood there in my kitchen with the aircon humming, and I read that date about 4 times. Because it was the weekend, the exact weekend, the one where Jose had been at her aunt's funeral in the province, crying down the phone to me at night, telling me she was so tired from the grieving, so tired, could I maybe send a little something for the flowers and the food, because a wake costs money. I'd sent P $15,000 for that wake, about $270, for flowers and food, for a funeral she wasn't at, in a province she wasn't in, on a night she spent in a short-time room in Mandaue. And I want to tell you I raged, that I threw something, put my fist through the wall. That's what you'd expect from a big man, yeah? But that's not what happened. What happened is, the thing that happens to me, the thing that made me good on the polls and useless everywhere else. I went cold. Cold and quiet and very, very still. It's a specific thing, that stillness. When you're up a pylon and something's gone wrong, a line you thought was dead gives you a bite, a bracket lets go, you don't panic. Panic kills you at 40 meters. Everything in you goes slow and clear and cold, and your hands know what to do before your head catches up. That's what came over me in that kitchen. Not heartbreak. Not yet. That came later, at 3 in the morning, in waves. In that moment, it was just the cold. Just a man reading a fault on a line and understanding, finally, completely, what the meter had been telling him for months. Warmth up when the money went out, warmth down when it didn't. I hadn't misread the meter. The meter was perfect. I just refused to believe what a perfect meter was telling me. I didn't phone her. That's the part people don't understand. Everyone wants the big confrontation, the screaming, the showdown. I didn't do any of that. I sat down at my little table, and I opened my banking app, and I did the one thing a man in my position can actually do. There was a transfer scheduled, the next tranche for the house, P $180,000, about $3,200, due to go to the cousin the builder in 3 days for the finishing, the tiles, the fittings. I canceled it. One tap. The way you kill a circuit before you touch it. You don't argue with the wire. You just cut the power, and then it can't hurt you anymore. And then I waited, because I wanted to see what happened when the power went off. That's the lineman in me again. God help me. I didn't want to fight. I wanted a test. I wanted to see what was actually holding that house up. Was it love, or was it money? There's only one way to find out. You cut the power, and you see what's still standing in the dark. 11 days it took. First 2 days, nothing. She was still at the funeral. Then she was back, and there were the good morning messages, the my love, the I miss you so much, Tito. Warm as ever. She didn't know yet that I knew. She just knew the transfer hadn't landed, and she was being patient, being sweet, waiting for the Kano to fix his little banking glitch. Day 4, the sweetness got a hard edge to it. Was there a problem with the bank? The cousin is asking. The materials are waiting. People are asking. My love, it is embarrassing for me. Day 7, when it was clear the money wasn't coming, the tears started. Long voice messages, crying. How could I do this? Did I not love her? Did I not love June, who asks for me every day? And then, and this is the one that told me everything, she brought out utang na loob. After everything Mama and this family have done for you, after we took you in, made you family, prayed for you, how can you shame us like this? You see what she did there? She flipped it. I gave this family the better part of 45,000 US dollars, and somehow I was the one with a debt of gratitude to pay. That's not love talking. Love doesn't send you an invoice for being loved. That was discarte, pure and cold, reaching for the one lever she thought would still work on the guilty Catholic-adjacent foreigner. But I'm not Catholic. I'm a Dutch Reformed boy from the East Rand who stopped believing much of anything the day Marina left. That lever had nothing to grab. Day 9, she got angry. Proper angry. If you don't trust me, then we are finished, and you will never see me or June again, and that is on you. Day 11, she went quiet, and I understood the quiet. The quiet meant she'd finally worked out the power wasn't coming back on, and there was no point running the lights in an empty house. I never got a confession. Not one word of it's true. I'm sorry. Just the accusation, the tears, the anger, the silence. 4 moves, and none of them was the truth. I never confronted her about the receipt. Never mentioned it. What for? The meter doesn't lie, and I'd already read it. She left the way the money left, quietly and all at once. Let me tell you what I lost, plain, so you can measure it against your own situation if you're a man sitting where I was sitting. The house money, $1.7 million, all in. Foundation to nearly finished. About 30,000 US dollars, gone into a house standing on land in a dead woman's family's name. Mama's name, technically, in a barangay outside Loon that I have no legal claim to and never did. I can't sell it. I can't live in it. I can't do one single thing with it. It just stands there in the red mud, a nice concrete house with the tiles half laid, and as far as the law of the Philippines is concerned, it has nothing to do with me and never did. Then the rest. The P95,000 for Mama. The P20,000 a month for the better part of a year. The tuition, the boxes, the wake that wasn't a wake, the uncles this, and the cousins that. Add it all up, and it's somewhere around 45,000 US dollars. Out of the 160 I walked in with. Near enough a third of everything I had in the world. 38 years up the poles, storms and shocks and a bad back, and 2 fingers that don't bend right anymore. A third of what all that bought me. Gone in 18 months to a bake shop and a warm evening and the word hour. But here's the thing, and it's the whole reason I'm sitting here telling you this, instead of some sadder story. I still had the other 2/3, 115 $120,000. Because I cut the power when I did. If I hadn't found that receipt, if I'd binned it without looking, which I nearly did, the house gets finished, and then it's a car, and then it's a business for the cousin, and then it's Mama's next procedure, and then it's a bigger house, and on until there's nothing left, and then they'd have had no more use for me at all. I've met those men since, the ones who didn't stop. Sitting in a Jollibee in Cebu with nothing, no ticket home, blacklisted for overstaying because they couldn't afford the fines, waiting on a pension that barely covers the room. That was the road I was on. I just got off it 11 days sooner than it wanted me to. Now, I've had a lot of time to think, and I want to be fair, because bitterness is easy, and it's also a lie. Was Joss a monster? No, I don't think so. I think she was a poor woman, 34, one kid, no husband, no money, working herself gray behind a counter for peanuts. And one day, a foreigner walks in with more money than her whole barangay will see in a lifetime, and every single person she's ever known would have told her she'd be a fool not to work that. That's discarte, survival. It's not the same as evil, even when it costs you everything. Did she love me? I honestly don't know. I think this is the hardest part. One think it was probably both. I think she liked me well enough, was fond of the old Kano who counted his change, and was also running a hustle on me the whole time, and I don't think she saw those two things as a contradiction the way I do. In her world, they fit together fine. A man provides. That's what he's for. And if you can get warmth out of it too, so much the better. I hated her for a while. I also missed her. I missed the boy more, if I'm honest. John didn't do anything wrong. He was 7. He just liked his Uncle Peter. Both things were true, and they still are. The mistake wasn't loving somebody. The mistake was this. I put my whole heart's weight on a thing I couldn't legally hold. You do not build a house on land that isn't yours. Not with money, not with your heart, not with anything. If your name can't go on the title, then it is not your house, man, no matter how many photos of the foundation she sends you. That's not a Philippine rule or a Filipina rule. That's just the rule. A load-bearing member you don't own is a load-bearing member that can be pulled out from under you any morning somebody decides to pull it. And the other thing, the real thing, underneath all of it. I didn't go there for a woman. I went there because I was a man who'd stopped being needed, and a whole family handed me away to feel needed again. And I paid for that feeling like it was oxygen. That's the wiring I should have checked. Not hers. Mine. The lonely bit in me that would have paid anything, believed anything, to matter to somebody again. She didn't put that fault in me. Marina didn't, even. It was mine to fix, and I was trying to fix it with GCash transfers. And you cannot. You cannot pay your way out of being lonely. It doesn't hold. So where am I now? Back in Boxburg. Same beige flat, more or less. Poorer by a third, older, quieter. Still on my own. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I found somebody and it all came right, because it didn't. That'd be a different channel. Some days it sits heavy. Some days I catch myself doing the sums again, the 40-odd thousand, and I have to stop. But I'll tell you one small thing I did. When I got back, I finally went into my phone, and I deleted Marina's number. 13 years I'd carried it. And after all that, after Joss and the house and the whole business, I don't fully know why, but I could finally do it. Maybe you have to lose a third of your money to a stranger, to finally let go of a number that was never going to ring. Maybe that was the most expensive delete button in history. But it's gone now. Small repair. A real one, though. First real one in a long time. That's it. That's my story. Count your change, boys, and check the title. Welcome back. And that's Peter, in his own words. Here's why we wanted to bring you this one. Most of the stories we tell on Inside the Philippines end in the dark. The man loses it all, flies home with nothing, or doesn't fly home at all. Peter's story is different, and the difference is exactly one folded receipt and 11 days of nerve. He lost around $40,000. That's real, and it hurts, and we're not going to pretend it doesn't. But he kept 120, because the moment he saw the truth, he acted on it. Cold, fast, and without needing a confession to give him permission. If you're watching this and something in it landed a little too close, the land in her name, the monthly transfers, the warmth that runs hot right after the money clears and cold right before, then hear the one practical thing under all of it. Foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines. Full stop. A house built on someone else's title is their house, not yours, however much of your money is in the walls. Generosity is a beautiful thing, and Filipino family obligation is real and often sincere, not a scam. But you have to know the difference between being a partner and being a power supply. A partner you build a life with. A power supply just gets switched on when they need current and switched off when they don't. Peter's still on his own tonight, in a quiet flat a long way from Bohol. But he's not ruined. And sometimes, in this business, not ruined is the whole victory. Look after yourselves out there. Count your change, check the title. And we'll see you next time, here on Inside the Philippines.